right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks again for joining. My name's Angie, and I'm here with Clara. We're both here from New Ventures BC, and this event is part of our annual competition. And we have the topic of SR&ED, the SR&ED program today, and we have Mo and Tamara here from EY, who you'll be hearing from momentarily. So just before we get started, we want to give a quick thank you to our sponsors and just tell you about a few upcoming events, and then we'll get into things. So our title sponsor is Innovate BC. Gold sponsor is, of course, EY. So in addition to doing events like this for us, they're also just a great partner in terms of, various areas of events and support, and we're super grateful to have them as a partner. We also have National Bank and Fasken as our gold sponsors. Other sponsors are Vantech, SFU BD School, Talkshop Media, UBC Solder, RBCX, and then we have lots of great bronze sponsors and media sponsors from the ecosystem at large. So, okay, just some upcoming events. So this Thursday, also via webinar, we have a Managing Your Intellectual Property session. So this is, let's say, introductory, gives you an idea of the concepts and things to consider with your intellectual property. This is being delivered with our co-delivered with our sister program, Accelerate IP, which is for early stage ventures, IP strategy and implementation support. And then the following week, I believe, we have a pitch seminar, and this is with our partners at Volition, who work with a lot of early stage startups as well. And the focus is really on how to be a good storyteller. And this will also be a support for those who are in the competition who need to give a pitch in the next round of competition. And we have, we'll be announcing soon HR, Intro to HR for Startup session, MyTax, which is another government program that you can access, and probably one more investor focus session as well. So a few more to go before we wrap up the competition sessions for the day or for the year. But for today, back to things here. So today we're going to talk about the SR&ED program, which is really a no-brainer of a program to access if you are in the tech field. However, there are a lot of good things to know about the program and how to leverage it, none of which I can tell you, but I do know the people who can. So this is, we have Mo and Tamara from EY, and they're going to walk you through the program and things to know, and we'll have lots of time for questions as well later on. So thanks for joining, and we will pass it over to Mo and Tamara to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Angie. I'm just going to start sharing my screen, just making sure that everyone sees the screen, and then I'll start right away. Can somebody tell me that you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Angie. Hi, everyone. My name is Mo. I am a partner at EY Vancouver. I lead our business tax incentive and SR&ED group on the IT side in Western Canada. I have a computer engineering background with an MBA as well. I've been with EY for the last 14, 15 years. And then previous to that, I was working at Nortel. I have Tamara, one of my colleagues, with me as well. What we're going to do, we're going to quickly introduce ourselves. So I'm going to pass it to Tamara. Tamara going to introduce herself, and then we're going to start like the presentation right after. Tamara, did you want to quickly introduce yourself as well, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mo. Hi, everyone. My name is Tamara. I'm a senior manager in our business tax incentive practice, and I'm in Vancouver. I work quite closely with Mo and his team. I'm a CPA, CGA, and I've been a SR&ED consultant now for about 15 years. I've assisted with the preparation of SR&ED claims for all different sizes of companies in almost every industry, and I've been with EY now for about 2.5 years.
Thank you, Tamara. All right, so our agenda. So we're going to talk, basically the introduction is done. We're going to talk about like the program overview. We're going to talk about the technical eligibility of the SR&ED program. We're going to talk about like the eligible cost that you can claim for SR&ED. We're going to talk about like our process, some examples, and then any questions that you might have, like we are going to answer those questions as well. We want to make this session as interactive as possible. So please use the chat to ask any question or raise your hand. Angie graciously offered to monitor the chat. I cannot see the chat when I'm doing the presentation, but she will let us know if any questions come up, and then we will answer those questions during the presentation, or if you want to leave it till end, we have set sometimes at the end to answer any questions that you might have at the end. So the program overview. So SR&ED is a tax incentive program. It was created in 1985. The purpose of the tax incentive program is to promote innovation and technological advancement in Canada, and at the same time want to keep the jobs in Canada and create further jobs. It is administered by the CRA. As far as the amount of the investment tax credit, which we call it ITC, that generated every year, it's around $3 billion for the last few years, even higher recently. And over 20,000 claimants every year take advantage of the program. Companies can recover 42% roughly from their expenditure. And that's the maximum. There are different categories of companies that Tamara gonna mention in the costing section, but up to 42.5% the companies can recover. And there is the benefit of the company doing some innovative work. I've seen it a lot of time, even in an M&A merger acquisition, a raising that the SR&ED comes up. So it's a very important program. It's kind of proving that you are doing innovative work in the industry. Some unique features about the program. You have generally 18 months after the fiscal year end to apply for SR&ED. It goes along with your tax return. So that means that your corporate tax return usually is due within 6 months. You can incorporate your SR&ED application into the tax return, or you have 1 year after the due date for the tax return to amend your tax return with the SR&ED program. So that's why it's 18 months after fiscal year, and that's the deadline for applying for the SR&ED program. If you miss that, unfortunately, you cannot go back, right? So for example, if your fiscal year end is December, right now you have the window for your 2023 and 2024 fiscal year end is still open to apply, but 2022, 2021, all of those years are gone, so you cannot claim for those. All companies and industries can qualify as long as there is they can meet the eligibility criteria. So it could be software, it could be hardware, it could be manufacturing, you name it, any kind of industry that they do R&D. If they qualify and they meet the criteria, they can apply for the SR&ED program. One of the very good thing about the SR&ED program is that it does the product or the application that you are developing, it doesn't have to be innovative, right? So if another company did produce the product and the solution is not publicly available, you can still do the same project and still apply for SR&ED and get the tax credit. I use this example all the time. If let's say Apple did the first touch screen, and then Samsung wanted to develop the same thing, and they had the issues with the temperature in Canada, for example, that goes super, super cold, in some areas, and the touch screen would not work, right? If Samsung wanted to tackle that by itself, and they wanted to do the development in Canada, they could still apply for the SR&ED program because Apple would not publicly release how they develop their touch screen, for example, if they developed it by themselves, and in Canada. Confidentiality is a big part of the program. So whatever as far as the technical report that they get submitted to the CRA, it's only between you and CRA, and it does not get publicly released. Success or failure doesn't really matter. So failure is definitely accepted as even in failure, you have some learning. At least you know what not to try next time that you have the same issue, and that is totally fine. It is not a grant, and that is very important. So, for example, there are lots of grants that are available, like IRAP, and like and a lot other more. But this is not a grant. So this is a tax incentive. So it is in the Tax Act. So that means that CRA doesn't put aside like $3 billion every year to give the companies, right? So if you qualify, CRA has to give you the credit. It's not like a grant that they can run out of money and then you have to wait until like the next allocation of like the grants for the next year. So that is very good. So if you qualify, you will get like your credit. And as I already mentioned this, it's a mature program. It has been around for a long time, and it can be a stamp, right? Again, I have seen it a lot of time that it becomes like they look at this the SR&ED program as far as like a company that's doing it, even during a merger acquisition, raising money, because it's a stamp that this company is doing innovative work, and it basically showcase that it can be even like better than the other competitions that they are not applying for the SR&ED program. As far as why claiming for SR&ED and different rates that are available in different provinces, Tamara, did you want to take this slide, please?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Mo. So why claim SR&ED? As Mo previously mentioned, companies can recover up to approximately 42% of their R&D expenditures in tax credits and or cash. To provide a bit more detail, Canadian-controlled private corporations, or CCPCs, meeting certain criteria may earn a federal SR&ED ITC at an enhanced rate of 35%. These ITCs are firstly applied to income tax payable for the year, and if there are any ITCs remaining, they may be refunded. The enhanced rate may be earned on qualified SR&ED expenditures up to a maximum threshold of $3 million. After the $3 million, federal ITCs are earned at the basic rate of 15%. Corporations other than certain CCPCs will earn federal SR&ED ITCs at that basic rate of 15%. These ITCs are non-refundable and can be used only to reduce income tax payable for the year. If excess ITCs remain, you can carry them back 3 years or forward 20 years in order to apply them against federal tax payable for other years. An additional 10% ITC is available to corporations with a permanent establishment in BC for SR&ED carried out in this province. Similar to the federal SR&ED ITC, the BC SR&ED tax credit is refundable for CCPCs up to a maximum threshold of $300,000 and non-refundable otherwise at a rate of 10% of SR&ED qualified BC expenditures. Non-refundable BC SR&ED tax credits can be carried back 3 years, similar to the federal SR&ED credits, and forward only 10 years to reduce BC income tax payable. And you may be wondering why the combined federal and BC provincial SR&ED ITC rates are not 45% and 25% respectively. The reason is because the BC SR&ED ITCs are considered government assistance and actually reduce the eligible SR&ED expenditure base when calculating the federal SR&ED ITCs. And as you can see from the slide that's up, other provinces and territories have differing provincial and territorial SR&ED ITC rates. Other provinces and territories also have differing refundability criteria, carry back and carry forward rules, and cost eligibility criteria.
Awesome. Thank you, Tamara. Moving on, let's talk about the technical eligibility of the SR&ED program. This is an interesting part because CRA has tried for many years to make this more simpler. And I don't know if I agree with them that they made it simpler or not, right? But they went from like 3 criteria from like previous to 2014. They went to 5 questions from 2015 to 2020. And then right now we do have the why and how. I'm going to explain it to you how basically it goes into your tax return, the technical report that needs to be written in the tax return, right? And then I'm going to explain and tie it back to how and why. And then this part basically is the most important part on the technical side. So if at any point, if you have any question after the talking about the eligibility criteria, please let me know. So in the tax return, still the write-ups has changed. Like even though CRA has changed, like the way that they view the program, right? So still there are 3 boxes that we need to write in the technical, like in as far as the technical report in your tax return. So the first one is technological uncertainty. What it is asking is basically, did you have a technical problem that routine and a standard solution would not be able to resolve it, right? So that is very important to understand the difference between the technical problem and technological problem. Technical uncertainty and technological uncertainty. You can have a technical problem, but as long as you can resolve that technical problem with your knowledge, with the engineering knowledge team that you have, or if you research, if you Google, you can find the solution to it. That would not qualify, and you cannot basically qualify the first criteria because that becomes like a technical problem. If you can prove that this is a technological problem, meaning that you research, you found out that there is no available solution to the technical problem that you have, then you have the base knowledge that you can say, this is the company-based knowledge or the industry-based knowledge, and you want to basically gain extra knowledge to be able to resolve this problem or basically coming up with the product that you are trying to develop. So the first criteria again is, did you have a technological uncertainty or technical problem that routine and a standard solution would not be able to resolve it? The second criteria is systematic investigation. So that means basically, did you systematically approach resolving the technical problem that we discussed earlier on, right? So we discussed that it's a technical problem, it became technological problem, and now we are talking about how you systematically approach resolving the issue. Did you come up with a prototype? Like, did you come up with the hypothesis phase? Did you, based on that hypothesis, did you come up with that prototype? How did you test that prototype? From the testing result, what did you learn that resulted in changing your hypothesis, right? And this is what we call like iterations, going from hypothesis to prototype, from prototype to basically testing, and from the testing going to analyze the testing result and learn something to change the prototype. So that is basically we call iteration. That's the best way to prove to CRA that there was a level of uncertainty about the solution. If the first iteration resolved the issue that you were facing, right, that means that it was most likely within the available knowledge. Your engineering team knew how to resolve it with the first approach. But the more and more of these iterations you have, the better chance that in case of an audit, you can prove to the CRA that this is not routine and a standard solution, or you would be able to resolve it within the first approach. You had to iteratively change your prototype to come up with a solution. And the last criteria is technological advancement. So that means like, what did you learn after going through all of these iterations? As I mentioned, success or failure doesn't really matter. Success, if you were able to resolve the issue, next time that you have the similar problem, you can resolve the issue with the learning that you gain. If you failed completely, at least you know what not to try. I'm going to quickly talk about the ties to the how and why like way of CRA looking at this. And then I will stop. If there is any question on the technical side, I will answer at this point. And then we will move on to like kind of like an example of like a day-to-day product that might qualify for the SR&ED program. So as you can see, there is the how and why sections in 2 different boxes, right? In my opinion, start with why. Why did you have to go beyond available technology to resolve the technical problem that you face, right? So that is the why section, right? So you discover that you have a technical problem, and then you are basically determining like what is the baseline for the knowledge within your company and within the industry, and you have to prove why you had to go beyond what is available in the industry. Then you go and talk, we go back and talk about the how. Basically, how did you come up with resolving that issue that you faced? So did you come up with like a hypothesis? From the hypothesis, did you come up with a prototype? From that prototype, how did you test that prototype? Did you analyze the testing and the testing results that you created after you conducted testing on the prototype? What did you learn from it that led you to change that hypothesis that you had to resolve the problem. And that is the how section. And then you go back to the why section and you talk about like what was the baseline and what was the incremental new knowledge that you gain that basically goes like that increase your knowledge that you had within your company, or if you decide to release it publicly within the industry. So I quickly pause here. If there's any questions on like the eligibility criteria, you can ask me. If not, I can go through some examples that might clarify this a little bit further.
Feel free to put up your hand if you want to ask. Otherwise, there's one question here. What kind of expenditures are qualified for SR&ED?
That's
Salaries.
Angie. That's going to be covered by what Tamara going to talk about later.
Okay. So we'll wait on that for later then.
And I think
oh, someone's oh, that's the same person.
that's perfect. Okay.
Yeah, do you have a separate? Yeah, we'll do it later. Okay, cool.
All right, sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. As far as a real life scenario, so I've never seen like a client, at least on my end, to come and say, hey, there was a technological uncertainty in the industry and I wanted to tackle that. Usually starts with a business initiative or business project, right? So from that business project, when you started, you hit a technical problem, possibly several times, several technical problems during the development, right? So for each of the technical problem, you have to first see if that due diligence, if what is available in the industry would resolve that technical problem or not. If it does, that means that you're all good, like you resolve that issue, and then you're getting closer and closer to coming up with your commercial product, right? But that means that that does not qualify for the SR&ED program. If the answer is no, so due diligence, meaning like your research in Googling, like your research in the like publicly available solution in the industry, like papers that are released by universities, all of those, and your technical staff would not be able to resolve it, that makes that technical issue a technological issue. So it becomes like a technological uncertainty. From there, we're going to go through the same kind of like iteration or systematic investigation that I was talking about, right? So from the technological uncertainty, you have a hypothesis, how to resolve that issue. From the hypothesis, you go to develop the prototype based on that hypothesis. From the hypothesis, you do some testing. So to see if that prototype actually resolved the issue or not. And hopefully you learn something that makes you change your hypothesis. So this is called iterations or systematic investigation. The more and more of these, as I mentioned, that you have, the better chance that you have to prove to CRA that your project qualifies for the program. I usually, in the technical report that we prepare, at least I try to have like 3 iterations for any technical problem that you guys face, basically to prove that this was a technological problem. After you resolve the issue, or you give up and you decided that this is not resolvable, basically you will get to your technological advancement, right? So that advancement, again, it could be like resolving the issue and all the learning that you gain through going through all those iterations, or it could be like basically failing completely because you were not able to resolve that technical issue. At least like it could be you can learn that these solutions would not be able to resolve this specific problem that you have. Documentation is definitely needed, especially in case of an audit. You don't have to submit any documents with your application, but in case of an audit, CRA is looking to get some documents to prove that that project actually happened, right? Think about it on 2 different aspects that you need to have some documents. First would be all the technical pieces, right? So that project actually happened, those technical issues actually happened, you did the research, like, and then you can prove that this was well above and beyond available industry knowledge. The other piece is on the caustic side, right? So now that you have that technological uncertainty, who was involved on working on this? How much salary did they get? How many hours did they spend on resolving those technical issues? So, for example, a timesheet would be ideal. On the IT side of things, usually what we see is like comments on the source code, like we see like timesheets a lot, or weekly minutes, or weekly report that discuss who was working on what. We see chat logs a lot, project planning at the beginning and how it was evolving like during the project, right? And then testing results. But you can see all the different categories here about like what kind of like documents can be used as supporting document. One thing that CRA always say is like they don't want you to create extra document for their shred program. Basically, they feel like naturally when you are doing the R&D, you create those documents. They have to be dated, and they could be used toward like any audits that you have with the shred application that you submit, right? But it is a good idea to make sure that you have these kind of documents. I know that some software development could be agile and lack some of the documents. If you're applying for the shred and you get a lot of like advantages, like you get a lot of money back, it's a good idea to respect that program and create the documents that are needed, especially if you get like a harder audit. They definitely come in handy at that point. The next section is the eligibility of the cost categories and basically the question that we had. I'm going to pass it to Tamara. Tamara, do you want to talk about this section, please?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Mo. I already see there's a lot of questions in the chat about expenditures. It's always what piques everybody's interest the most of these presentations. So generally there's 4 cost categories or buckets, like we like to call them, that are eligible to claim. So we've got labor, materials, contracts, and third-party payments, and overhead expenditures. And I will talk about them in more detail in the following slides. So first up, labor. So in order to be eligible, salaries and wages must be for Canadian T4 employees directly engaged in shred activities. The majority of the shred work must be performed in Canada, and the salaries and wages must be paid within 180 days of year end in order to be claimed. The CRA does allow a very small portion of salary and wages that can be claimed for shred work carried on outside of Canada, given that certain criteria are met. And generally, the claimable amount is the lesser of the actual salary or wages for shred work carried on outside of Canada, or 10% of the total salary or wages claimed for shred carried on inside of Canada. And as I said earlier, they're looking for, employees' time that's directly engaged in shred. So what does directly engaged mean exactly? So employees, including managers and supervisors, conducting experimentation and analysis are considered to be directly engaged in shred. Additionally, employees, including managers and supervisors, are considered to be directly engaged in shred when they are performing support work that is directly in support of the shred and includes activities like engineering, design, operations, research, mathematical analysis, computer programming, data collection, testing, and I've never seen a claim with psychological research, but apparently psychological research is also a support activity. Supervision of employees performing shred is an eligible activity. And for non-specialized employees performing tasks such as operating machine for the purposes of an experiment that requires the use of the machine, or feeding raw materials into a machine, in order for their time to be eligible, the non-specialized employees' work must be supervised by staff with scientific or technical qualifications. Technological planning for ongoing shred, including assignment of technological personnel, job priorities, development of technical strategies, or quality of materials used, is also an eligible activity. And technological feasibility studies relating to shred projects carried out, and technical documents for internal use. CRA also allows employees that are directly engaged in shred for 90% or more of their time to be claimed at 100%. This is known as all or substantially all in shred, or ASA for short. Bonuses paid to specified employees are not eligible. CRA views these expenses as being tied to the profits of the business versus an expenditure directly related to any shred work performed by the specified employee. And you're probably wondering, what is a specified employee? So a specified employee is a person who owns directly or indirectly 10% or more of the issued shares of any class of the capital stock of the employer at any corporation related to the employer. And a specified employee could also be someone related to a specified shareholder. And there are some categories of payments made to employees that the CRA does not recognize as eligible shred or eligible salary or wage amounts, and includes commissions, retiring allowances, extended leave benefits, and stock option benefits. And I know I did happen to see a question in the comment. I believe Todd was asking, can you comment on eligibility of founder shareholder salaries versus employee salaries? Then again, it's very important. I know a lot of specified or shareholders, they'll take dividends. Dividends are not eligible. They're explicitly not eligible. It is very important that eligible wages are T4'd. All right, so next, materials. So materials that are eligible for shred, they can be purchased items that are consumed or transformed during the execution of shred and can include components, parts, raw materials, and chemicals. Materials consumed are generally destroyed or reduced to less than 10% of their value as a result of the shred, and we most commonly see this where there's destructive testing required during the execution of shred. Materials transformed, however, are materials that form a part of a thing or a prototype at year end and are intended for use in future shred activities. Recapture of shred ITCs earned on materials transformed may occur if, for example, the prototype is sold or later used for commercial purposes. Materials don't need to be purchased from Canadian vendors. And if materials are purchased from a related business, no markup can be claimed. Only the base cost of materials can be claimed. And the cost to have materials shipped and stored can also be included in the overall cost of the materials. We like to refer to that as the fully loaded cost. Expenditures of a capital nature are not eligible, but I will touch on some ineligible expenditures, including capital, later on. Next, contractors and third-party payments.
Oh, hey, Tamara, Todd just had a clarification. So if a founder has a salary via T4, then that
Yes.
qualify for shred.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Thanks, Sanji. All right, contractors. So payments made to contractors to conduct shred activities on the claimant's behalf are eligible, but they're only eligible at 80% of their cost. And in order for contract expenditures to be eligible, work must be performed in Canada by a Canadian contractor. You'll hear this a lot. I probably sound like a broken record, but as this is a Canadian tax incentive program, they like to really foster R&D activities or shred activities, in this case, in Canada. So we've seen situations where if there's a contractor that has a global presence, sometimes the work is performed outside of Canada, but the invoices are through their Canadian entity. CRA will generally pick up on that, and that contract expenditure ends up being not eligible. Only contract expenditures for work done on directly engaged support activities, so very similar to what I detailed in the labor cost section, so design, analysis, all that stuff, are eligible to be claimed as shred. Generally, electricians, millwrights, for example, are not considered shred eligible contract expenditures. They are usually included in another cost bucket that I'll talk about after this one. CRA also does generally look into who has the right to exploit the shred by identifying which company holds the intellectual property rights. So it's very important that, if you have a contractor that's doing work for you and they own the IP of the work that's being done, you're likely not going to be able to claim that expenditure. And contract work, it's claimed in the year it was done, and it should be supported by invoices and proof of payment. And to be claimable, these expenditures need to be paid within 180 days of year end. And then the other big one is contracts between non-arm's length parties are not eligible. We sometimes see, you know, in small owner-operated businesses where they might hire a sibling who's working as a contractor. Generally, those are not eligible expenditures because they're considered non-arm's length. All right, and then third-party payments are very similar. They're payments made to universities and research institutes for SR&ED. They're eligible, but also at 80% of their cost. And in order for third-party payments to be eligible, the claimant must be able to show that the payments are for SR&ED, they're related to the business of the claimant, and that the claimant is entitled to exploit the results of the SR&ED by showing that they have gained the rights to use the results of the SR&ED in their business as a direct result of the payment. All right, and finally, overhead. So generally, overheads are those additional costs not included in the previously mentioned cost categories that are necessary to perform SR&ED. And CRA has two allowable methods to capture overhead expenditures for SR&ED. It's the proxy method and the traditional method. The proxy method calculates overhead expenditures at a flat rate of 55% of SR&ED wages claimed. And this method is favorable for claimants with significant SR&ED wages. We generally see that this is extremely favorable for IT clients, where it's generally all going to be, or predominantly going to be, SR&ED wages and maybe some contractors. The traditional method is a bit more onerous on the claimant, as it requires identification of individual overhead expenditures that are incremental and directly attributable to the SR&ED work performed. This concept is generally easier to demonstrate by providing examples of some of these costs. So earlier I said, you know, generally CRA won't see millwrights and electricians, for example, as eligible contractor costs. Generally, they'll view these more as overhead costs. Things like utilities, if there's travel for SR&ED, and then salary and wages of clerical and admin staff providing a service to SR&ED employees. Fixed costs are generally out. You would be paying those regardless if SR&ED was happening or not, so they don't really meet that, you know, the directly attributable and incremental to the SR&ED work being performed. And I think the next one is the common expenditures that are not eligible. So generally, some of these expenditures can be great indicators that SR&ED may be occurring, however, they're not eligible. So patent and legal fees, foreign labor or contractors, rentals and leases including buildings, software licenses, rental of equipment required to perform SR&ED, not eligible. Capital expenditures including hardware and software purchases for software developers, machinery and equipment for manufacturing, and conference registration and attendance. And I think that's back to you, Mo.
Sorry, I was looking for the mute button. Tamara, there were a few questions just to make sure that we could go over them. So for buying the equipment, I think we already mentioned that the capital expenditure cannot qualify. There was one other question that was, I think Marcelo asked about, just to confirm, if you're pre-revenue, you're early for the program. That is not correct. There are a lot of like IT clients that, or any kind of like clients that they can claim during the R&D phase, and you can claim even like when you are making millions of dollars. So being like in a revenue or in a taxable position or not doesn't really matter. The only piece that it does matter, and Tamara, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you are a non-CCPC claimant, you only can generate tax credit rather than refundable tax credit. So we do have clients that don't have the need for the tax credit if they are not in a taxable position. Anything else that you want to add on this, Tamara?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, yeah, you don't need to be making any money. You just have to have the expenditures, right? And the expenditures have to be kind of in the tax period that you're claiming. So if you are doing a 2023 claim any expenditures that are incurred in 2023, those are what is important because they follow your tax filing. So it's having the expenditures, because unfortunately this isn't like an upfront grant program. You have to kind of invest the money into your R&D in order to get the money after the fact.
And
And
Tamara, there was one more kind of related to that, asking if there's a difference between CCPC and BC Benefit Corporation in terms of accessing SR&ED.
I think this came up a while ago, and I honestly, off the top of my head, I cannot remember, but I do know that we've looked into this before. So it's a very unique situation. That's all I know. And I did see another question just now. Oh, I think Mo did answer. I was going to say the 55% of wages only, or can you claim 55% of contractor fees as well? And Mo answered only wages.
And someone had
correct.
asked if cloud costs would qualify, but I assume that's a no based on this slide.
Yeah, that one generally not. They would not qualify.
But think about it. I think a lot of like these would would be for like the software claimant. As Tamara mentioned, there is that 55% overhead that can qualify. So a lot of these can be covered by that 55%, which is very generous. 55% of like the eligible wages, right? So just FYI, for example, if you had $100,000 eligible salary, and CRA automatically give you another 55% on the SR&ED expenditure. So your expenditure increased by another 55%. So it becomes like $155,000 eligible expenditure. And from that, you get 42.5% or 42% back, right? So a lot of these expenditure, like on the cloud, on the rent, on like internet, electricity, can be covered by that overhead.
And
And
there's
I just saw, sorry, I was just going to say, I just saw Ben asking, so employees who spend 90+% of their time performing eligible tasks can be claimed at 100%. When is it 55% or 100%? Okay, so that's a bit different. So basically, yeah, you're right. Employees who spend more than 90% or more of their time in performing eligible tasks can be claimed at 100%. The 55% is like basically CRA's approved method as like a blanket to capture any overhead. So it's separate from the wages, but it's a 55% based on eligible wages. So it gives you that coverage to add in without having to go through and pick and choose, you know, overheads and all that. It's just a blanket 55% that's to cover any kind of overheads. And like Mo said, includes things that are explicitly not eligible, like rent and, you know, hardware and software, capital expenditures, that kind of thing.
And there was a follow-on question around the salary, the T4 salary question from Peter. So is it common for bootstrapping founders to pay themselves salary just for the sake of claiming SR&ED, assuming they're engaged in R&D work? Is that considered a legitimate use of the SR&ED program?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just a weighting of, you know, the cash flow. You know, obviously there's, you know, you have to pay income tax on what you're paying yourself. Like it's kind of a weighing the pros and cons of, would you want to pay yourself a dividend or you want to pay yourself a salary for SR&ED. Different people have differing opinions on it.
Okay, another eligible cost question. High costs on ML, machine learning, I assume training. Is that anything eligible there?
Training is generally out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if it was like just as a FYI, if you had to change like the your training model, machine learning model to make it understand the kind of data that you have better, or if you had to clean the incoming data to remove the noise, these are more technical activities that can qualify for the SR&ED program.
Okay.
But Tamara is right, training usually doesn't qualify. So Ashley asked about like the benefit company. Ashley, if you can email me or Tamara, we can get back to you after about the CCPC versus the benefit company that you were talking about.
Yeah, and I think Angie's probably going to share our contact information as well after
Absolutely.
the presentation. So please feel free to reach out to us and we can look into that for you.
Right.
Um,
There are more questions, but do you want to finish your presentation?
Yeah, so maybe like we stop at Hamid's question and then we finish the presentation and we come back to that quickly. We still have, we definitely leave time at the end of the presentation to answer the question. If there is no, like if we don't have time and we finish the presentation, please reach out to us. You will have our contact information and we will answer any questions that you might have offline. All right, as far as like usual process for EY, how we help you to prepare your claim. Usually I start with like a SR&ED 101 session, especially if you have not applied for the SR&ED program. After that, we talk to the engineering team and main technical people to identify like the technical projects that would qualify for the SR&ED program. And then within those projects, we identify technical activities that would qualify. From there, we find out the cost associated to those technical eligible activities. And that means that we need to start like gathering cost allocation to those as well. So our costing team members like Tamara and a few other members get involved and talk to the costing teams of the client versus like the technical team members on the, let's say, IT or non-IT talk to the engineering team. After we gather all the information, there are two pieces that need to be created. One of them would be the technical reports that goes to your tax return. So we create the technical report and then we share it with the engineering team just to make sure that we capture everything accurately. And then on the costing side, the cost calculation needs to happen by our costing team members. We call it cost schedules. And when the cost schedules get created, we share it with the costing team members of the client just to make sure that we capture everything accurately as well. After we get the final approval from the claimant, what we do, we either incorporate the SR&ED return to your tax return, or if it is past the 6 months deadline, we amend your tax return and submit it to the CRA. We basically, if the client needs us to be involved in case of an audit, we help like the claimant with the audit process as well. And then hopefully when you get that money based on the different kind of like agreement that you have, if we are contingent, we get our money at that point. If we are hourly or fixed fee, it's going to be a different scenario. But I would say like a lot of like clients gets audited within the 2-3 years span of time that you submit to submit SR&ED claim. So we definitely can help with that as well. Examples of SR&ED on the IT side, honestly, like machine learning and AI has been a big topic. We have seen it like a lot recently during the last few years. Performance, I would say 95% of like the claims that we submit, there is a performance aspect into it too, that the product that you develop, it's not performing as fast as possible or as fast as you need it, or when you introduce more data, it's crashing, so you want to make it better and faster. So that comes into play a lot on the IT side as well, and security definitely comes into play too. But like there are so many different like projects that we deal with, but these are the most common one on the IT side. On the non-IC sites, for example, life science, formulation, shelf life, antigen, like those kind of things on the life science comes into play. But again, like these are just examples in 2 different industries. There are so many other industries. We have oil and gas, forestry, mining, a lot of other ones as well, right? But these are just a couple of examples with 2 different industries. My background is IT. I'm a computer engineer, so I know way more on the computer side, hardware development side, rather than just life science, forestry, mining, or anything else. So that's about it. We put aside like 15 minutes, well, right now 10 minutes to answer any questions that you might have. We're going to go through those questions. If there's any question that we cannot answer, the presentation going to be shared with you guys. You can add me and Tamara on LinkedIn as well and ask us the questions there as well. But feel free to send us an email or like add us in LinkedIn and we answer any questions that are outstanding. But I think we answered all the questions up to Hamid's question. So I'm going to read that. And then at the end, if you want to come off mute and then answer your questions verbally as well, and that's totally fine. If you're pre-revenue, would I get refunded for the incurred R&D expenses, or would I get tax credit toward future revenue? Tamara, feel free to jump in, but this doesn't have anything to do with like if you're pre-revenue or not. This is about like the structure of your company. If you're CCPC, you will get like a
Yep.
refundable tax credit. If you're non-CCPC, you get non-refundable. Please, Tamara, anything else?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, Mo. If your company is a Canadian controlled private corporation or CCPC, as we've been saying, you're likely entitled to the high rate, fully refundable federal ITC, as well as the refundable 10% BC ITC. Any other company generally is getting the basic federal rate of 15%, which is non-refundable, and the 10% BC ITC as a non-refundable ITC. And then those you can carry back and forward as well.
Awesome. Armin is asking, I have a contract with the university's R&D department. They only send me an invoice. Shall I ask for a breakdown of the hours and wages to be added to their invoices in order to be eligible for SR&ED?
Nope, not required. It sounds like that could either be a contract payment for SR&ED or a third-party payment for SR&ED. And generally, it would depend on the form of the contract that you have with the university, as to if that's a contract expenditure for SR&ED or a third-party payment for SR&ED. And honestly, they're claimable at the same amount, so 80% of the cost, but you don't necessarily need the details. The only time it gets tricky is sometimes we have some clients that will actually rent out a university's facility to be able to conduct their testing because they just don't have the funding or the cash flow to invest in, larger pieces of equipment to do their kind of initial startup testing and bench scale testing. Things like those expenditures are not eligible. So, if there's a situation like that happening, then I would get a more detailed breakdown and exclude anything that's explicitly ineligible. But that sounds like you're working directly, having the R&D department at the university doing the work, unless they're billing you some kind of, overhead charge for rent or something like that. But it doesn't sound like it.
Awesome. Employees who spend less than 90% of their time performing eligible tasks can be still claimed as well. If so, at what rate?
It would still be like, it would completely depend on how much time they're spending. Like, if it's we see a lot of, especially, Mo and I see a lot of, owner operated businesses that are quite small, and we'll have somebody who's, an owner. They're going to be, neck deep in software development, but they're also going to be doing sales and business development and those kind of activities. And it really just is, we claim their SR&ED wages at whatever percent they're likely going to be, able to show that they're actually directly engaged in SR&ED activities. Generally, the higher up in the company, the less likely they're going to be directly engaged, or a large portion of their time. As far as the proxy overhead, the 55%, it all is just dependent. Like it's 55% across the board, but it essentially takes the combined amount of your total SR&ED wages that you're claiming and just applies a 55%. And that's going to be a mix of employees who might be 90% or more, 20%, 10%. That doesn't matter because the 55% proxy overhead allowance doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the base that it's calculated on, which is your eligible SR&ED wages.
Yeah, basically that 90% just came into discussion because all or substantially all. If you can prove that 90% of like an employee is dedicated to SR&ED, you can claim the 100%. Everything else, if it is below that, you can still claim. There's another question similar to that. What about part-time employees, 20 hours per week, spending 90% of their time in the SR&ED activities on the project? As Tamara, I assume that is going to be 90% or all or substantial, or it doesn't matter if they are part-time or full-time.
Exactly.
If you have two shareable projects, 90% could be across those projects. Yes. So yeah, so that basically is just the time that the employees spend on those projects. It doesn't matter if it is on a single project or 10 different projects. Hamid is asking, I need to rent a lab to perform R&D chemical experiments. At what rate would the rent be eligible for SR&ED?
Unfortunately, rent is explicitly excluded as a SR&ED eligible cost, so 0, unfortunately.
Peter asking, what would the fact that a project is approved for my tax fundings serve as evidence that it's SR&ED eligible? No, unfortunately not. I wonder if travel costs abroad to use a test bed for SR&ED activity has been carried out in Canada would be eligible. So sorry, I don't know if I read it right. Kamyab is asking, I wonder if travel costs abroad to use a test bed for SR&ED activity has been carried out in Canada would be eligible.
That would, I mean, if travel costs, is it somebody coming in from abroad to Canada, or is it somebody traveling outside of Canada? I guess to get a better understanding.
And feel free to come off mute. This is the last question. So if you, Kamyab, if you want to just come off mute and then elaborate on your question, that would be good.
Someone traveling outside of Canada. I mean, I've seen it in situations where we're claiming a very small amount of salaries for people doing work outside of Canada, but it's like a very small allowance for salaries, and then it would really depend on how much, because ultimately CRA wants the SR&ED to be happening in Canada. And so it's kind of this, if it's just, one-off trip, maybe it's a couple days. It's very, very case specific if we would be aggressive enough to want to claim those costs and how much they were.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify that the test bed that we have used is located in Sweden, and that took us like 2 weeks to have 2 people there to use the test bed. So that was the reason I asked the question.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it would only make sense if we were able to have a case to claim that small portion of time spent outside of Canada as part of the SR&ED claim, but they'd want to see the bulk of the work being like, if there was 0 SR&ED work done in Canada and that was kind of the only thing being done, probably not. But if there was a substantial time in SR&ED that, you're claiming for work done in Canada, and then that small 2-week, maybe. It's very, very case specific.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're just about at time, but I think as demonstrated by the wide range of, detailed questions, there's lots of nuance to the program. It definitely makes sense to unless you know this inside out, to talk to people like Mo and Tamara at EY or other service providers. There are certainly lots of SR&ED providers. So I always say to people who, when we work with our accelerators clients, pick the service provider that has the person you want to work with, right? So certainly lots of options. I'm clearly biased because EY I've worked with a long time, but I can certainly tell you I've observed Mo is one of those people. And I have more experience talking to Mo than Tamara, but I'm sure they're both like this. They show up, they ask questions, and they're generally definitely here to help. So, and as related to that, they are going to give us a copy of the slide deck, so we will share that with you. And I believe the contact info is included in there. So if you do have any follow-up questions, they've always been super, super supportive about following up if you do want to follow up, and particularly with your company. So we will leave it there, but you'll get an email with instructions on where to access the deck and things once we've got it all up. And this is being recorded. We'll also share that as well. So just want to give one more thank you to Clara on my team for organizing, and of course Mo and Tamara for sharing your expertise and adding a lot of color to this program. That's super important part of R&D when it comes to tech companies. So thanks again, everyone, and we will see you at the next one.